Putin claims Poseidon drone test a world-first nuclear breakthrough. US sanctions force Lukoil to sell key assets across Europe. Here's the latest, so you will be in focus. Subscribe and stay tuned. Putin announced tests of the underwater drone Poseidon with a nuclear power plant. The Russian dictator first mentioned it back in 2018. A year later, Russia's Ministry of Defense released footage of the Poseidon tests. 6 years have passed since then. Putin called the latest launch a huge success and assured propagandists that there is no equivalent to the Russian underwater drone. Why Moscow decided to announce a whole series of weapons tests is explored in our report.
Russia has for the first time managed to activate the nuclear propulsion unit on which the Poseidon drone operated for a certain period, Putin told Kremlin propagandists. According to the Russian dictator, this drone is more powerful than Russia's Sarmat missile, and as usual, has no analogues now or in the future. Incidentally, the dictator once again promised that the heavy silo-based intercontinental ballistic missile RS-28 Sarmat would soon enter combat duty. He has been making this claim with remarkable consistency since 2020.
In June 2023, during a meeting with graduates of military academies, in the near future, Sarmat systems will enter combat duty. Yet in September, Roscosmos head Yuri Borisov claimed they were already on combat duty. In May 2022, the then Roscosmos chief Rogozin promised nearly 50 Sarmats would soon be on combat duty. And in April 2021, the Russian dictator told the Federal Assembly that by the end of 2022, an entire regiment armed with Sarmat ballistic missiles would be on combat duty. From a publication by Defense Express.
If the Kremlin is to be believed, Poseidon tests were conducted just days after the test launch of the Burevestnik cruise missile with a nuclear warhead propulsion unit from the Novaya Zemlya archipelago in the Barents Sea. The launch was confirmed by the head of Norway's military intelligence service.
The public first learned of the Burevestnik intercontinental cruise missile project in 2018 from Putin's address to the Federal Assembly. The U.S. Analytical Center Nuclear Threat Initiative, citing U.S. intelligence data, reported that between 2017 and 2019, Russia conducted at least 13 Burevestnik tests, but only 2 were partially successful. From a publication in Novaya Gazeta Europe. One launch means nothing. You need a large number of launches to determine if it works, if it's reliable, what it's capable of, and so on. As often happens, a few attempts, then suddenly one succeeds, and it's everything's fine, fear us now. That's not how nuclear deterrence works.
Putin claims the missile's range is unlimited and its flight path unpredictable. He prefers not to recall that the August 2019 Burevestnik test at a range in Arkhangelsk region failed, killing 7 people. In addition to Burevestnik, Russia announced launches of Yars and Sineva intercontinental ballistic missiles from the Plesetsk Cosmodrome during nuclear exercises. All of this is a show of force to disrupt aid to Ukraine, experts believe.
The fact is, these scare tactics are nothing more than information operations. The second Oreshnik launch failed, and Burevestnik flies only in words. Putin is simply recycling ideas from Naryshkin, stolen from the May days of the Cuban Missile Crisis. There is no threat of attacks on NATO. Lavrov's talk of security guarantees from Russia to NATO is part of the Kremlin's information game. For now, Trump is best countering this game in the West with his nuclear submarine. Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Center for Countering Disinformation at the National Security and Defense Council, on Telegram.
The Russian weaponry Putin boasts about does not match its claimed specifications, experts say. Russia's military-industrial complex cannot function without Western components, and import substitution is not helping.
In such situations, a country's fate usually depends on whether it has allies capable of providing strong material support. Russia has none. China sells some components but gives no loans. Russia is now consolidating its last resources, and they are apparently running out. Problems in the military industry were already being discussed a year and a half ago.
This new round of demonstrative saber-rattling is Moscow's response to discussions about possibly supplying U.S. Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine, analysts suggest. For years, Moscow has used training launches and nuclear carrier tests to blackmail the West, reported by Victoria Chistyukina, UATV News.
Due to sanctions imposed by the United States on October 23rd, Lukoil, one of Russia's largest oil companies, is forced to sell its foreign assets in 11 countries. These include refineries in Bulgaria, Romania and the Netherlands, as well as a network of gas stations across EU countries. Yulia Grinovskaya provides more details.
Lukoil is finished. writes Politico, citing a former top manager of the oil company. Due to harsh U.S. sanctions aimed at cutting off the Kremlin's ability to finance the war against Ukraine, Lukoil is forced to sell its foreign assets. Without them, the company will lose a third of its revenue. In 2024, the company's revenue reached nearly 8.5 trillion rubles. Of that, more than $1 trillion went to shareholders. For example, Vaget Alekperov was paid over $2 billion. Now it seems he will have to say goodbye to super profits.
Due to sanctions and the forced sell-off, Lukoil could lose 15 to 17% of its total hydrocarbon production. Abroad, it extracts 6.5% of its oil and nearly half of its gas, write Alpha Bank analysts. Foreign refineries that supply a network of 5,000 gas stations provide Lukoil with a quarter of its total refining volume. The loss of foreign assets could have a significant impact on Lukoil's financial performance, warns Alpha Bank, from a publication by the Moscow Times on Telegram.
Sanctioned Rosneft and Lukoil account for about 2/3 of the 4 million barrels of crude oil Russia exports daily. Now, Lukoil needs to sell 3 oil refineries and about half of its roughly 5,000 gas stations worldwide. And there isn't much time for this. Starting November 21st, the company could face serious fines.
In reality, we need to understand that sanctions have a delayed effect, and the first serious consequences for Rosneft, Lukoil, and the budget won't be seen until December, January, or February next year. Their revenues will collapse by up to 40% in oil and gas income, so this is a serious matter.
Meanwhile, the main importers of Russian oil are rushing to take advantage of the situation. One of the primary buyers of Russia's seaborne fuel shipments, India, is not only reducing supplies, but also demanding another discount from the supplier, clearly as payment for the risk. Additional discounts on Russian oil for New Delhi and Beijing have already reached $15 per barrel. With discounts, Moscow is now selling Brent-grade oil for less than $50 per barrel, which is critically low, economists explain.
Trade is becoming unprofitable. It's already around cost price, bringing no income to corporations like Rosneft or Lukoil, nor to the Russian budget. This is a really serious issue. We see even from official data that the finance ministry reports oil and gas revenues are only a small part of the income the budget gets from Russian oil and gas companies. Just 2 taxes, extraction and export. These 2 taxes have already fallen by 20 to 22% from January to September. And the finance ministry officially acknowledges about 3 trillion rubles in lost oil and gas revenues.
So far, oil shipments through Russia's western ports, Primorsk, Ust-Luga, and Novorossiysk, have not decreased. But in the near future, oil companies will face serious payment problems, traders warn. Banks need proof that payments are not being made in the interests of sanctioned companies, writes Reuters, and buyers are unwilling to take risks. Since October 26th, the tanker Prometei carrying Russian oil bound for India has been drifting off the country's western coast. Recently, another tanker, Furia, loaded in Primorsk with 730,000 barrels of crude from Rosneft, changed its mind about heading to the Indian port of destination and is now drifting off Germany's coast. The Indian companies designated to receive these cargoes have refused the deliveries. Russia's largest buyer of crude oil, Reliance Industries, has stated it is preparing for large-scale reductions in imports of Russian crude. The Indian company has already purchased at least 2.5 million barrels of Middle Eastern oil and is ready to place even more orders soon. Reported by Yulia Hranovska, UATV News.
What's your take on all this? Share it with us below. This is UATV. Stay sharp, in focus, and stay safe.